Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Kristen Dorr. I'm the Integro webinar moderator. You're joining us in one of our monthly webinars. We host webinars every month, lasting 30 minutes, so it's a quick and valuable use of your time. Today, we're going to be chatting about email governance, and I'm lucky to have Chris McHenry on the phone with me today. He's the VP of Technology here at Integro, and he's going to be chatting about smart filing of valuable email into Box for governance and compliance. Before he takes it away, I do have a few quick notes for you guys. First is, we have polling questions today. Yay. Chris has prepared a couple of polling questions for all of you. One will happen near the start of the presentation, and one will happen closer to the end of his presentation. We just like interacting with you guys, kind of getting a read of the room, how you guys are experiencing email governance and the like. And the other thing I'll quickly mention is that Chris will be answering your questions at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions at any time, feel free to ask them in the question box, and he will answer them at the end. So Chris, I will let you take it away.
Great. Thank you, Kristen, and thank you all for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk to you about our solution for smart filing of valuable email into Box for the specific use case of compliance and governance. So a high level of agenda of what I'm going to cover today. So why would we want to file and govern email, first of all? And then what are some of the benefits of email governance? I want to outline our solution for modern email governance, and then leave you with some parting thoughts and questions and answers. So as Kristen mentioned, please leave any questions in the chat area, and we'll try to get those at the end. So let's get started. So if you've been involved or attended any presentations or read anything on information governance, you've likely seen this kind of a slide. So it's a little bit of the fear factor, but these are some of the reasons that governing email is so important. Email is a treasure trove of sensitive information, unfortunately. And each of these external actors knows that information, so they're going to try to go after that in terms of litigation. Cyber criminals are going to know that. If they can access your email, that's obviously a treasure trove of information. Sometimes passwords and personally identifiable information is in there and that kind of thing. So security risk, and those have associated costs with them. And newly on the scene is the regulatory challenges such as GDPR and the California Consumer Privacy Act. Likely we're going to have a federal legislation in this regard as well, but the fines there are fairly staggering. So one of the cases going on right now, British Airways is looking at a £500 million fine for their breach of GDPR. So remains to be seen what's going to happen in that case or other future cases, but the fines can be enormous. So there's a serious cost to not governing the email and properly, and it's becoming less and less. The ability to kind of let this slide is becoming less and less. So why would we want to file email into Box? Well, there's a couple different use cases I'd like to highlight. First of all, collaboration. As we all know, email is a silo, so if we have important information in there and we need to share it, it's kind of hard to do that. We forward it around and the context gets lost and so forth. So filing it into Box gives you a way to share that knowledge, and others can find it quickly using search and the taxonomy and enhanced metadata through Box skills and things of that nature. So filing to Box is a very good solution for collaboration. Additionally, email often is the entry point for many of our business processes. And so there's a productivity use case to leverage email to trigger the business process and then manage the content in the content services repository such as Box. So you get that single source of information and you can trigger your workflows that way. The use case, obviously, we're here to talk about is compliance and governance. And so having your content in a secure repository enables you to easily manage it easier, and it can reduce your risk by keeping the content for the right amount of time using Box governance. and it's extremely cheap comparative to on-prem archiving solutions. So you get unlimited storage, and it's fairly reasonable for the pricing. So much in administration is considerably less as well. So right now I'm going to hit on what is, open up a poll. What is your planned or current approach to retaining email? So we've got a couple different options here. Kristen should have opened up the poll there, and some of the options: delete everything, retain everything in an archive or repository. We keep only what we need. We delete email according to a records retention schedule, and we have no governance program in place. So if you could take a moment and answer the poll, it'd be interesting to see what everybody comes up with. We'll give you a moment or two.
Awesome. I'm going to close the poll now and share the results.
Great. So I'm seeing, looks like 44% delete email according to a records retention schedule. Fantastic. That's great to hear. 22% keep only what we need, and then 11% retain everything in an archive or repository. So yeah, a lot of different options here. Some of you don't have a program in place, so hopefully by the end of this presentation, we're going to convince you that it's a good idea to start working on that. So let's move along here. So what we see at Integro, some of the organizations are doing, back in the early 2000s with Sarbanes-Oxley and the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, the immediate response from most of our customers was to start journaling the email. In other words, they capture all the email and then move that into some content repository where it can be easily searched and produced for e-discovery. So that was the kind of initial response to those regulatory influences in the early 2000s. We also saw a lot of customers implement the next two policies where they would either impose an arbitrary quota on their users, or they'd have a very short auto-delete policy for email. And for both of those scenarios, the repercussions were really a dramatic impact to users' productivity, because some of the content they need to keep around to do their work, and they were kind of put on this hamster wheel of trying to keep their mailbox under a certain quota, or either work around the solution to keep the email that they actually needed to do their job. So that's a bad approach, in that it really has a dramatic effect on end users' email productivity. And we all know that email consumes a great deal of our time, so we don't want to add more burden to that effort for our end users. And then there's still quite a few organizations that are not doing anything yet. And I think, like I said, it's becoming imperative that they adopt a program for email governance going forward, due to all the regulatory and legal threats that are appearing in our organizations. So these are some real metrics we've seen from our customers. The first one here, 85% reduction in email volume. So by deleting the transient email, or the email that you read and kind of forget about and has no longer any value, they reduced their email volume by 85%. And this had kind of an ancillary effect in that they decided at one point to move their mail system from an on-prem environment to a cloud environment. And that migration had a dramatic cost savings for them. In fact, it wasn't, it was provided by the vendor in this case. Because their mailboxes were so small, it was easy to accomplish that migration. So that was a huge cost savings, and gave them a lot of agility in terms of the ability to move their email system to a new environment and save some money going forward. Another customer saw approximately a $2 million reduction in litigation savings per year, and that's just due to email discovery. So that estimated $120,000 per case roughly. So a big drop in litigation costs in terms of email discovery. And then lastly, another customer saw 15 terabytes reduced in their email archive storage. And you often hear the term storage is cheap, but this archive storage is not so cheap if anybody's had to deal with it, because it's pretty expensive to scale, and it requires a lot of specialized skill sets to keep that working and operating effectively. So reducing that long-term storage, and especially stemming the growth of that, has a dramatic effect on your costs in terms of IT. So there's a hard cost savings there. So some pretty good benefits that you can see from the solution of email governance. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about, we've been working on this email governance for many, many years now, going on probably 15 years or so. And we've come up with this approach that we like to think of as modern email governance. We've trademarked the term zone management of email, and we view the mailbox in terms of these 3 zones. So I mentioned earlier that transient zone, or what we call the auto delete zone. That's the kind of content you get in your mailbox, you read, and then it has very limited value, and you often rarely go back to it. We see across the, most organizations, the average is 80% falls into this transient zone. So the vast majority of your email, and ironically, that's where a lot of the source of risk is in your organization. So we want to get rid of that as quickly as possible. Not, you don't want to put a burden on the end user. So you can set a policy, a general policy of, maybe 3 or 6 months initially, and scale that back as people adopt the system and work with it. But yeah, you should get rid of that transient content fairly quickly to have a good email governance program. The next zone is the working zone, and we often get email that are related to projects we're working on or things that we need to do to perform our duties for the organization. And so prohibiting a user from keeping that content, which has some value over time, you may want to go back and refer to your meeting notes. You may want to go back and look at your project status reports, or some correspondence that took place with a customer. That's all valuable business content that you don't want to force the user to get rid of. So they need to keep that for a longer period of time. And you can, with our system, you can put a quota on that to kind of prevent them from, going wild with that. But at the same time, they can keep a great percentage of that for a longer period of time, often a year as a typical policy that's implemented, but you can configure that. You can either have a quota or not in a long time frame on that type of content. It's a one-click operation to tag the content into that zone. Then lastly, the smallest percentage is records of the organization. So these are important records of the organization. They memorialize a business transaction. They're important to maintain for the proper length of time for regulatory and compliance purposes and so forth, or they just have business value as the organization for some period of time. So managing those types of emails by their content, not by some arbitrary policy, is very important. And again, it's a vast, fairly negligible amount of email that falls into that zone. We also have a technology called Smart Assist that makes it super easy to identify these records, and over time that will pretty much be automated for your end users. So we alleviate a lot of the burden. Again, that's a fairly, you're going to see in the demo here that I do in a moment, it's a very easy thing to tag the email into that zone. So that's our zone management concept for modern email governance. We have a couple different deployment options that are possible. Oops, I think I went too far. So we work well with Office 365. We have a govern in place model that works for some organizations that don't need that kind of centralized repository for their records. And so we can manage and dispose of the content in place across all 3 of those zones at the right amount of time. We work with Office 365 in the cloud. We also have a solution where you can govern the records in a repository. So you move only the 5% important documents into your repository, such as Box. We support a few others as well, but you can manage them there according to the retention schedule. We also work with on-prem Exchange in those 2 flavors, and we also have a govern in place on-prem for Lotus Domino if you're running that mail system. So now I want to jump into the demo here and show you a few things with our solution, how it works to file this content into Box. We're going to highlight Smart Assist that I mentioned earlier, that auto classification with human oversight, how you can drag and drop into your own user-defined folders, and we can tag in place, and then how that content gets into Box. So I'm going to jump over into my Outlook environment. And so typical Outlook mailbox, you'll see here, we've got a few emails in there already. The most notable thing I want to point out here that is a little bit different with our product is we have this designation pane, is what we call it, a little ribbon bar that you can pin out. I'm going to leave it pinned out so it'll be easy to demo with. And this designation pane is the thing that allows you to tag the emails into one of the three zones. So not designated, that would be your transient zone. The work in progress, that's your working zone. And then the official record is your record zone. So that's very small, 5% of content. So I'm going to go ahead and we're getting some email in here. That should be exciting to see what happens to that. I have this legal hold notice. I'm going to go ahead and manually tag that in place and show you how that works. I'm going to make it a record. It's a legal document, obviously, so I'm going to tag it into the administration legal category. And you can see what happens. It gets this teal check mark. And so it's now declared as a record. And on a periodic basis, that will be archived into Box, as we'll see in a moment here. Another thing that we can do, let's say that I have a folder structure, and let me find my folder here. So I've got a product folder that I use. So that product folder currently doesn't have anything in it, but let's say I want to set up a profile for that folder. Again, this is my own user-defined folder, nothing pushed out to me or anything like that. I can kind of set up my own folder structure, manage it as I see fit. I can tag that as being the product record category. I'm going to go ahead and set up that profile for the folder. Now if I go back to my inbox and I find this product email from the CIA assassin Jason Bourne here, I put it into my doubling as a product project manager here. I can put that into my products folder. And you'll see that that inherited the profile. You can see it there on the left in the designation pane. It inherited that product record category from the profile. So just a drag and drop operation to make that a record. And then I'm going to go back to my inbox, and it looks like those two emails I got, they have an interesting icon on them. So we've got the gold star here, and that indicates that our Smart Assist product flagged this as a potential record. You can see the status is potential, and that's that auto classification with human oversight. So we've got a 77% confidence that it's a product email, in which case it is. It's testing results from our product here. And so I could go ahead and confirm that and make it a record just by one click, and that will go ahead and confirm the record. Likewise, I got another email here with a red check mark. That red check mark indicates that it was automatically declared by Smart Assist. So Smart Assist said, I've got such a high confidence in this. In this case, it's over 90%, that I went ahead and made it a record in the accounting and finance. So you can see it's an invoice for services provided, which is very likely to be a accounting and finance document. And it auto-declared it as a record. And you can set these thresholds as applicable for your organization. So this one's a fairly high threshold. We only want those over 90% auto-declared. So I've kind of hit on the key use cases here for declaring content. One last thing I want to point out, let's say that, let's pick a good one here. So machine learning, let's say I want to keep this around. I'm working on a machine learning project here. It's all the rage these days. So I need to keep this document around, and I want to put that in my work in progress zone. So you can see that the icon for that one changed to the little dog-eared post-it note, and that's now in my work in progress zone. So that will not be auto-deleted. It'll be deleted according to a different deletion schedule, and I can see that here in my configuration. It's going to be deleted in approximately 2 years. So I have an 800 megabyte quota for that zone. I can keep a lot of email in there, and it'll be auto-deleted after 2 years. And again, these are policies that your organization could configure with our product. So now I've tagged some email as records. Let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like to us in the Box repository. So I'm going to jump over to my web browser. I've already logged into my Box repository, and I've got this folder structure here, the IEM archive demo that kind of mirrors our file plan that we saw in our designation pane earlier in Integro Email Manager. So for example, if I want to drill into the administration category and take a look at that accounting and finance, we have subfolders in there for the mailboxes. And in this case, Jade Green is my current mailbox user, and we auto assign access to that user to this folder so they can see their own record. And right now there's nothing in there yet, but in a moment that'll get archived. We have a background process that picks these records up, and that's usually run on a scheduled basis once a day. We also have a grace period there, but in a moment that'll get picked up. I'm going to take a look at some of the other folders, like the legal folder. Again, we have Jade Green. You can see this legal hold notice from a couple days ago. We're going to archive that one again. So it's all filed into this folder structure, and we can apply retention policies with box governance on these different folders applicable to the different categories. So that's critical to be able to manage these for the right amount of time. We can search very quickly and easily across these archived emails. Another thing I want to point out is that the email is stored in native format, MSG, so easily usable in Outlook and Exchange. You get a little preview pane here. Some of the characters didn't come across, but it gives you a nice quick preview. You can download this and open it right in your Outlook client, and it'll come right up in Outlook. And you can see that the email is full fidelity, and you don't lose anything. All your attachments and everything are maintained. So it's very important for discovery, regulatory purposes, to have that content in native format. We also populate some metadata in Box on the content. So we have the subject, the IEM status, the file plan category. So those can be used to drive retention as well, the declarer, the category, and so forth. So all that content gets automatically populated into Box, so you have some enhanced metadata to support the manageability and governance in your repository. So I'm going to go back up a level, and in a moment here, I think we should see some of that content archived in there by now. We'll see. So there we go. Yeah, we got a new invoice for services archived into Box. So it picked up that record that I declared. In this case, it was Smart Assist auto-declared it. I didn't have to do anything. The service picked up that email, archived it to Box in full fidelity, and that's there for governance and discovery and so on and so forth. So you can see Box is pretty nice environment to manage these things in. If I go back to my mailbox, you also see something happened a little different here. I have these little kind of torn half pages. If I look at my designation pane, what that's labeled as is an archived copy. So it's a convenience copy left in my mailbox that I can either delete now, since the official copy is in the repository. I can keep for reference purposes, and as an organization, we can set retention on those as well. And delete them on a much quicker basis than you might delete the record. So, you could delete these after 60 days, for example. So that's kind of the process of smart filing of email into Box. I'm going to jump back and kind of wrap things up, and then we'll take your questions in just a moment here. So get back in my presentation. So a couple parting thoughts here. I hope you got the sense that our solution is not very disruptive to the user. It's easy to use. It doesn't interrupt their workflow. There's no serious change in your behavior with email. Kind of works along with your folder structure. So that's really critical to a governance program, that you're not asking your users to further decrease their productivity with email, because it is such a burden on most users these days. And we only, pardon me, we only want to keep the email that has value. We don't want to keep all this transient or rot content. AIM calls that rot, or redundant, outdated, and trivial. That's the source of risk in most organizations for these e-discovery and data breaches and things of that nature. So let's get rid of that risky and low value content on a much quicker basis. And then let's move the important content into a central repository like Box, and leverage governance to keep it for the right amount of time. So that is kind of the end of my presentation. I want to kind of cycle back now and take another poll. In an ideal situation, how would you prefer your approach to governance, having heard all this? So Kristen, if you could open that poll up. We'll let you take a few moments.
I'll remind everyone on the call, if you have any questions, please ask those in the question box. We already have a few for Chris. So I will close the poll now, Chris, and share the results.
Okay. All right. It looks like, yeah, the vast majority both either want to keep what you need or keep it according to the records retention schedule. So that's great. Hopefully that's compelling, and you go forward and take that to your organization. So with that, I will conclude and open up the questions. So Kristen, I will defer to you. Do we have any questions to answer at this time?
We do. We have one question that
great.
is asking for a bit more clarification around auto classification versus manual classification, and how the user would engage with their emails versus what they can expect to be auto-classified, and how that works.
Right. So yeah, we're classifying the emails according to the content. So it's not just the metadata, and it's not a rules-based classification. It's using a machine learning approach. So there's a step involved where we have to collect some samples and train the system to get that working. And what happens is, a lot of times we'll roll out Integro Email Manager without that if there's not a good existing corpus of content to train the model on initially. We'll roll IEM out without the Smart Assist, and then over time we'll be able to gather that, because users will naturally manually classify that content, and then we'll be able to start leveraging it. And as we do more of that, it gets better and better by getting that user feedback. So that's kind of how it surfaces in most organizations. And hopefully that answered the question. So as an end user, I can either, when they're auto-declared, I can either undeclare them or change them to a different category. That provides some essential feedback for improving the classification system over time.
Awesome. Couple more questions for you. I know everyone on the line, we are at the 30-minute mark. We are recording this, so if you have to hop off, that's totally fine. We'll share the recording with you guys in a couple days. So a few more questions for you, Chris, just since we have them. Are the zone retention policies configurable?
Absolutely. That's a key cornerstone. I'm going to jump over and just kind of show something quickly. So back in my email configuration, so we have the working zone. We can configure the auto delete for that as 720 days. And then we have this more granular breakdown of the auto delete zone. So all other email, 180 days, archived copies, completed tasks, junk mail. So we have this pretty granular breakdown of unclassified email that can be configured. And then in our control center, we can also configure, we allow configuration of the policies. This is for the in-place governance on a category basis. So we can specify the retention interval for each category if we're managing in place. Likewise, in Box, you could set up Box governance to perform that retention.
Okay, I have one more question for you, and then we can close out. Will the user be notified when emails are going to be deleted?
Yes, that's a good one. So again, in our mail client here, we have what's called the dashboard, and there's a setting here that you can, I don't have it checked right now, but you can have this display each morning as you open the dashboard, because typically we run the auto delete overnight. So it happens at, you know, midnight, for example. It can be configured to be whatever your organization wants it to be. But overnight, the deletions will happen. So we'll show the dashboard to the users each day, and the dashboard gives them a visibility into what's going to be deleted. So you can see I have 2 emails that are going to be deleted. I can actually drill into it and see those emails. So yeah, that's how we can give user visibility into what's going to be deleted.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, and thank you to everyone on the line for hanging out with us. Hopefully you found Chris's presentation valuable. I will just quickly note we have a survey that'll pop up at the end of the presentation, just asking a few quick questions for your feedback. And Chris, I will let you close out.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope this was valuable content. And as always, if there's anything we can do to clarify or provide more information, we're very happy to help you out. So good luck to you all, and thanks again.